Benghazi or what happened in Benghazi, and there was an author of an email 3 months to the day, 3 months to the day from when our 4 fellow Americans were killed. The author of the email says anti-American demonstration, looking for Americans to attack, game changer, soft target, no continuity, the cost to continue to do business there may become challenging. Would you want to talk to the author of that email if you were investigating Benghazi?
The Accountability Review Board had full run of the State Department to talk to anyone they chose to talk to. It's my understanding they conducted more than 100 interviews, and they were well aware, as their report reflects, of the dangerous situation in Libya.
I don't want to interrupt you. That actually was not my question. My question is, would you want to talk to that person? Not whether or not the ARB did, because the ARB actually did talk to that person. My question is, wouldn't you want to talk to that person if you were investigating Benghazi? Well, I promise it is not a trick question. The answer is yes. You would want to talk to the person who authored that email.
And as you just said, Mr. Chairman, the ARB did.
Yes, and the co-chair of the ARB called your chief of staff and told the author of that email not to go to Congress. That's my point. My point is the ARB did some good things. That's why our first 2 hearings were on making sure the recommendations by the ARB were actually implemented. But when the author of that email is going to be brought before Congress and one of the co-chairs calls your chief of staff and says, I don't think that that witness is going to be a good witness, Madam Secretary, with all due respect, she's a fact witness, whether she's good or bad. The author of that email has a right for Congress to question them. I mean, that's not even a close question. So somebody can be a good person, and I have no doubt that Mr. Mullen and Mr. Pickering both are. But this is also what I don't doubt. I don't doubt that that phone call was made to Ms. Mills saying don't send Charlene Lamb before Congress. She's not going to make a good witness. And I don't doubt that there's not a transcript from any of the ARB interviews. And you may say, well, why does that matter? If you're going to write a report, and you want to write a report with specificity and particularity, you have to cite the transcript. And I can't tell you a single question that was asked of a single ARB witness because there is no transcript. So my point is not that the ARB did a bad job or a good job. My point is from a standpoint of a serious investigation, it was an inadequate job. And I want to hopefully prove that to you. There used to be a stack up there when Mr. Smith was with us about all the previous investigations that Congress and the ARB had done. Did any of those previous congressional investigations or the ARB have access to your emails?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, the witness you were referring to did appear before Congress.
That was not my point.
But your implication was that that witness was stopped from going to Congress.
No,
in fact, that did not happen, Mr. Chairman.
No, she definitely came.
Yes.
No, that's not my implication. My implication is the co-chair of what you call an independent accountability review board was calling someone he was supposed to be investigating to say, please don't send that witness to Congress. They're not going to show up well. That's my point. My point is, how can you consider that to be, I mean,
well,
have you ever heard of a judge calling the DA or the defense attorney and say, don't call that witness?
I really don't care what you all say about me. It doesn't bother me a bit. I do care a lot about what you're implying about Admiral Mullen, and I will not sit here and hear that. Well, Admiral Mullen served this country with great distinction. He served the State Department with great distinction in being the co-chair of the Accountability Review Board. And I think his work speaks for itself. Well, and I'm sorry that the important work that was done by that board is held in such low regard by some members of this committee, and I deeply regret it.
Are you doubting that he placed the phone call? Is that the purpose?
I know nothing about the phone call.
Well, I do, because he testified before another congressional committee. He admits it was a mistake, Madam Secretary. I don't know why you can't. Well, he admits it was a mistake to call and say, don't send a fact witness before a congressional committee.
Well, I think that
doesn't mean he's a bad person. It just means that when you hold up the ARB as independent and Your chief of staff picked most of the folks on it. Patrick Kennedy had a role in picking some of the folks on the ARB, despite the fact that some people think Patrick Kennedy may have also been involved in approving or not approving. If you need to read a note from your lawyer, you're welcome to, Madam Secretary.
No, it's just hard to sit here listening to the comments you're making about someone that I consider to be a great American. If he said he made a mistake, that's even more proof of what a fine gentleman he is and what a great public servant he's been. It doesn't in any way, what you're saying, impugn his service for 40 years and certainly not his service on the Accountability Review Board. I can't help it, Mr. Chairman, that you all don't like the findings of the Accountability Review Board.
We had
I can't
two
help
hearings.
it that you don't like the findings of all the other congressional committees.
We had 2 hearings where we did nothing but discuss the implementation of the ARB findings, Madam Secretary. So with all due respect, we've had more hearings about the ARB findings than we have with you. So don't tell me that we don't care about the ARB. We had 2 hearings. My point is this: the ARB nor the previous congressional investigations had access to your emails, did they?
I don't know what they had access to. I know that during the time I was at the State Department, there was certainly a great effort to respond to your predecessor, Congressman Iss's inquiries, and many thousands of pages of information was conveyed to the Congress. And I know that the State Department has worked diligently and persistently to try to respond to the many requests that it has received. And I think that given the pressure and stress of business they've been under, they have performed as well as they could. So you will be getting, and in fact the entire world will be getting, all of my emails, because they're all going to be public, and you will be able to read them along with everybody else.
Madam Secretary, that actually was not my question. My question was whether or not the previous congressional committees and ARB had access to your emails. That was my question.
90 to 95% of my work-related emails were in the state system. If they wanted to see them, they would certainly have been able to do so. You know what?
That is maybe the 10th time you have cited that figure today.
It is.
And I have not heard anyone other than you ever cite that figure. Who told you that 90 to 95% of your emails were in the State Department system? Who told you that?
We learned that from the State Department in their analysis of the emails that were already on the system. We were trying to help them close some gaps that they had.
Can you provide me with a name? Because when I asked the State Department about 10 days ago, what's the source of that figure, they shrugged their shoulders.
Well, you can look for the state.gov addresses, and they certainly pop up. And
right, and the Inspector General report, Madam Secretary, the Inspector General report, which you can't argue by perfect analogy, but you can certainly extrapolate, the Inspector General report found that less than 1% of State Department emails, record emails, were captured. So they give a number of less than 1%, and you give a number of 90%.
Well, I don't know what you're referring to. I can only speak about my emails, my work-related emails.
Well, let's talk about your work-related emails. We asked for them last year, and the State Department gave us 8. If they had 90% of yours, why did we only get 8?
Well, I don't know initially what you asked for, but I know that they tried to be responsive. 90 to 95% of them were on state.gov. I understand that the committee broadened the scope of their requests, and I think that in response, the State Department has been trying to provide what you have requested. In the meantime, they're going through the process of making all of my emails public.
You think our first request, there were only 8 emails responsive to our first request?
I can't speak to it. I believe your first request was for Benghazi, and I believe that the State Department did a diligent search. Then I believe you expanded it to Libya and weapons and maybe a few other terms, and I believe they conducted
our jurisdiction hasn't grown, Madam Secretary. Our jurisdiction is the same thing it was. Let me ask you this. You say that you turned over everything. I don't get a chance to watch you a lot on television, but when I see you are interviewed, you make a point of saying, I turned over everything.
All my work-related emails.
How do you know that?
I know that because there was an exhaustive search done under the supervision of my attorneys, and that is exactly the outcome. We turned over every work-related email. In fact, as somebody referred to earlier, we turned over too many. In the State Department and the National Archives said there were 1,246 out of the 30,000 plus that they've already determined did not need to be turned over.
And you have a really good group of attorneys, which makes me wonder how they missed 15 of them.
Well, if you're talking about Mr. Blumenthal, which I assume you are, he had some that I didn't have, and I had some that he didn't have, and I was under no obligation to make any of his emails available unless I decided they were work-related. And the ones that I decided that were work-related, I forwarded to the state.gov accounts of the people with whom I worked.
Madam Secretary, is there any question that the 15 that James Cole turned over to us were work-related? There was no ambiguity about that. They were work-related.
Well, they were from a personal friend, not any official government, not any government official, and I determined on the basis of looking at them what I thought was work-related and what wasn't. And some I didn't even have time to read, Mr. Chairman.
So are you telling me the 15, are you telling me that the 15, I will tell the gentlelady from California that I'm going to take a little bit extra time, just like everybody else has, and we can either do it this round, or we can do it next round.
May I make a simple inquiry about how many more minutes the chairman plans?
The fewer the interruptions, the quicker I can get done. I'll put it to you that way.
Okay.
How's that?
I'm just
The 15,
mindful of the time.
my question to you on the 15 is, did your lawyers find them and decide that they weren't work-related, or did they not find them?
Well, I don't know why he had emails I didn't, and I don't know why apparently I had emails he didn't. And all I can tell you is that I turned over every work-related email in my possession.
All right, I'm going to make two more observations, and then we're going to call it a night. The first observation that I would make is that when you speak to the public, you say, I turned over everything. That's, for the most part, a direct quote. When you talk to the public, you say, I turned over everything. When you talk to the court, you say, while I do not know what information may be responsive for purposes of this lawsuit, I have directed that all my emails on clintonemail.com in my custody that were or potentially were federal records be provided to the Department of State, and on information and belief that was done. Why the different explanation depending on who you're talking to?
Well, one is a shorthand, Mr. Chairman.
Well, why not just tell the court I turned over everything?
Well, you know how lawyers are. They use more words perhaps than they need.
Trust me, I know that, and they charge you for every one of them.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that, Mr. Chairman, and the clock is ticking.
Well, one more, and I'll pay Mr. Kendall's fee for the last question.
Oh, I don't think you want to do that, Mr. Chairman.
I probably can't do it. You see my point, though? You're very definitive when you're talking to the American people that you turned over everything.
That's right.
But there are those kind of lawyerly fudge words when you're talking to court on information and belief.
Well,
and the reality is, even tonight, you cannot tell us that you turned over everything because you didn't think you missed the 15.
Well, I didn't have them. I turned over everything I had. Everything I had has been turned over to the State Department. Which means the system you had
somehow missed those 15.
Well,
last question on your system. Mr. Cummings said that your email arrangement was inappropriate. I think the president may have said it was a mistake. You have said that it was a mistake. My question to you, Madam Secretary, is was it a mistake for the 4 years that you had that email arrangement? Was it a mistake for the almost 2 years that you kept the public record to yourself, or has it manifest itself as a mistake in just the last 6 months?
Well, since I believed that all of my work-related emails to .gov accounts were being captured and preserved, it wasn't until I was asked to help the State Department to fill in what they saw as some record-keeping gaps, not just with me, but with others. I did the best I could during those 4 years and thought that everything that I was emailing that was work-related was being preserved.
If you can find a source for the 90 to 95%, I would be grateful for it, and we would probably have fewer questions. If there is a source that you can provide that 90 to 95% were on the State Department system, then I'll know that I need to ask the State Department what took them so long. Because I'm just telling you, Madam Secretary, I got 8 emails the first time I asked, and now I've got over 1,500. So there's some disconnect there.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that is a fair question. And I'm not at the State Department any longer, but I do want to defend them. They are under the most extraordinary pressure to answer congressional inquiries. I saw a figure recently that FOIA requests have jumped something like 300%. They don't have the resources. They don't have the personnel. They take their responsibility of reading every single line, and as Ranking Member Cummings reminded us, having to redact personal information, personnel information, obviously they take it very seriously. I think they're doing the best they can, and I know that they've tried to be responsive to you and to the many other requests that have come their way.
Well, Madam Secretary, on behalf
Mr. Chairman, you just gave a long answer, Madam Secretary, to Ms. Sanchez about what you heard that night, what you're doing, but nowhere in there did you mention a video. You didn't mention a video because there was never a video-inspired protest in Benghazi. There was in Cairo, but not in Benghazi. Victoria Nuland, your spokesperson at the State Department, hours after the attack said this: Benghazi has been attacked by militants. In Cairo, police have removed demonstrators. Benghazi, you got weapons and explosions. Cairo, you got spray paint and rocks. 1 hour before the attack in Benghazi, Chris Stevens walks the diplomat to the front gate. The ambassador didn't report a demonstration. He didn't report it because it never happened. An eyewitness in the command center that night on the ground said no protest, no demonstration. 2 intelligence reports that day. No protest, no demonstration. The attack starts at 3:42 Eastern Time, ends at approximately 11:40 p.m. that night. At 4:06, an ops alert goes out across the State Department. It says this: mission under attack, armed men, shots fired, explosions heard. No mention of a video, no mention of a protest, no mention of a demonstration. But the best evidence is Greg Hicks, the #2 guy in Libya, the guy who worked side by side with Ambassador Stevens. He was asked if there had been a protest, would the ambassador have reported it? Mr. Hicks' response, absolutely. For there to have been a demonstration on Chris Stevens' front door and him not to have reported it is unbelievable, Mr. Hicks said. He said, secondly, if it had been reported, he would have been out the back door within minutes, and there was a back gate. Everything points to a terrorist attack. We just heard from Mr. Pompeo about the long history of terrorist incidents, terrorist violence in the country, and yet 5 days later, Susan Rice goes on 5 TV shows, and she says this: Benghazi was a spontaneous reaction as a consequence of a video. A statement we all know is false. But don't take my word for it. Here's what others have said. Rice was off the reservation on 5 networks, White House worried about the politics. Republicans didn't make those statements. They were made by the people who work for you in the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau, the actual experts on Libya in the State Department. So, if there's no evidence for a video-inspired protest, then where'd the false narrative start? Started with you, Madam Secretary. At 10:08, on the night of the attack, you released this statement: some have sought to justify the vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material posted on the internet. At 10:08, with no evidence, at 10:08, before the attack is over, at 10:08, when Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty are still on the roof of the annex fighting for their lives, the official statement of the State Department blames a video. Why?
During the day on September 11th, as you did mention, Congressman, there was a very large protest against our embassy in Cairo. Protesters breached the walls. They tore down the American flag. And it was of grave concern to us because the inflammatory video had been shown on Egyptian television, which has a broader reach than just inside Egypt. And if you look at what I said, I referred to the video that night in a very specific way. I said, some have sought to justify the attack because of the video. I used those words deliberately, not to ascribe a motive to every attacker, but as a warning to those across the region that there was no justification for further attacks. And in fact, during the course of that week, we had many attacks that were all about the video. We had people breaching the walls of our embassies in Tunis and Khartoum. We had people, thankfully not Americans, dying at protests, but that's what was going on, Congressman.
Secretary Clinton, I appreciate most of those attacks were after the attack on the facility in Benghazi. You mentioned Cairo. It was interesting what else Ms. Newland said that day. She said, if pressed by the press, if there's a connection between Cairo and Benghazi, she said this, there's no connection between the two. So here's what troubles me. Your experts knew the truth. Your spokesperson knew the truth. Greg Hicks knew the truth. But what troubles me more is I think you knew the truth. I want to show you a few things here. You're looking at an email you sent to your family. Here's what you said. At 11 o'clock that night, approximately 1 hour after you told the American people it was a video, you say to your family, 2 officers were killed today in Benghazi by an al-Qaeda-like group. You tell the American people one thing, you tell your family an entirely different story. Also, on the night of the attack, you had a call with the president of Libya. Here's what you said to him. Ansar al-Sharia is claiming responsibility. It's interesting, Mr. Katala, one of the guys arrested and charged, actually belonged to that group. And finally, and most significantly, the next day, within 24 hours, you had a conversation with the Egyptian Prime Minister. You told him this: we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. Let me read that one more time. We know, not we think, not it might be, we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. State Department experts knew the truth. You knew the truth, but that's not what the American people got. And again, the American people want to know why. Why didn't you tell the American people exactly what you told the Egyptian Prime Minister?
Well, I think if you look at the statement that I made, I clearly said that it was an attack, and I also said that there were some who tried to justify it on the basis of the video, Congressman. And I think
but real quick, calling it an attack is like saying the sky's blue. Of course, it was an attack.
Well,
we want to know the truth. The statement you sent out was a statement on Benghazi, and you say vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material on the internet. If that's not pointing as the motive of being a video, I don't know what is. And that's certainly how the American people saw it.
Well, Congressman, there was a lot of conflicting information that we were trying to make sense of. The situation was very fluid. It was fast moving. There was also a claim of responsibility by Ansar al-Sharia. And when I talked to the Egyptian Prime Minister, I said that this was a claim of responsibility by Ansar al-Sharia, by a group that was affiliated, or at least wanted to be affiliated with al-Qaeda. Sometime after that, the next day, early the next morning after that, on the 12th or 13th, they retracted their claim of responsibility.
Madam Secretary?
And I think if you look at what all of us were trying to do, and we were in a position, Congressman, of trying to make sense of a lot of incoming information and watch the way the intelligence community tried to make sense of it.
Madam Secretary.
So all I can say is nobody...
There was not conflicting information the day of the attack because your press secretary said, if pressed, there's no connection between Cairo and Benghazi. It was clear. You're the ones who muddied it up, not the information.
Well, there's no connection.
Here's what I think's going on. Here's what I think's going on. Let me show you one more slide. Again, this is from Victoria Nuland, your press person. She says to Jake Sullivan and Philippe Reines, subject line reads this: Romney's statement on Libya. Email says, this is what Ben was talking about. I assume Ben is the now somewhat famous Ben Rhodes, author of the Talking Points memo. This email is at 10:35, 27 minutes after your 10:08 statement. 27 minutes after you've told everyone it's a video. While Americans are still fighting because the attack's still going on, your top people are talking politics. Seems to me that night you had three options, Secretary. You could tell the truth, like you did with your family, like you did with the Libyan president, like you did with the Egyptian prime minister. Tell them it was a terrorist attack. You could say, you know what, we're not quite sure. Don't really know for sure. I don't think the evidence is there. I think it's all in the first one, but you could have done that. But you picked a third option. You picked the video narrative. You picked the one with no evidence, and you did it because Libya was supposed to be, as Mr. Roskin pointed out, this great success story for the Obama White House and the Clinton State Department. And a key campaign theme that year was GM's alive, bin Laden's dead, Al-Qaeda's on the run. And now you have a terrorist attack. And it's a terrorist attack in Libya. And it's just 56 days before an election. You can live with a protest about a video. That won't hurt you. But a terrorist attack will. So you can't be square with the American people. You can tell your family it's a terrorist attack, but not the American people. You can tell the president of Libya it's a terrorist attack, but not the American people. And you can tell the Egyptian prime minister it's a terrorist attack, but you can't tell your own people the truth. Madam Secretary, Americans can live with the fact that good people sometimes give their lives for this country. They don't like it. They mourn for those families. They pray for those families. But they can live with it. But what they can't take, what they can't live with, is when their government's not square with them. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Trump. Mr. Trump, welcome back, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Sean.
What is your reaction to the ongoing feud?
Well, number one, I really respect the fact that Jeb is sticking up for his brother. I mean, I would stick up for my brothers also, and he's sticking up for his brother, and I understand that. But this all started when he said that we're safe, you know, the country was safe. Well, the World Trade Center was just attacked. It fell down. 3,000 people were killed. Thousands and thousands of people were injured, and to this day are injured, and it was the worst attack in history. So you can't say he kept our country safe because he was president. You know, as Truman said, the buck stops here. So he was president. And if you look at my book, which was written a couple of years prior to the attack, I actually mentioned the name of Osama bin Laden, that he's a bad terrorist and we have to do something about it. And when one of your competitors heard about it today, they said, whoa, whoa, this is amazing. Trump actually predicted it. Because I actually said in the book that something would happen. Nobody talks about it, but I actually talk about the name Osama bin Laden.
I have the quote. Let me put it up on the screen. This is exactly what you wrote. This was in a book you published in 2000, The America We Deserve. You said, I am really convinced that we're in danger of the sort of terrorist attacks that will make the bombing of the Trade Center look like kids play with firecrackers. No sensible analyst rejects this possibility, and plenty of them, like me, are not wondering if, but when it will happen. In the book, you also wrote, quote, one day, we're told that a shadowy figure with no fixed address named Osama bin Laden is public enemy #1, and U.S. jet fighters lay waste to his camp in Afghanistan. He escapes back under some rocks, and a few news cycles later, it's on to a new enemy, a new crisis. How could you have stopped it?
I mean, I know what's happening, Sean. I know what's going on. I think I could have stopped it because I have very tough illegal immigration policies. And people aren't coming into this country unless they're vetted and vetted properly. If you look at what happened, George Tenet, who was the head of the CIA, first of all, the CIA and the FBI and everybody else, they weren't talking with each other because they weren't getting along. That's leadership. You have to get everybody to get along. Second of all, George Tenet predicted an attack. George Tenet said there's going to be an attack. They should have done something about it. So I'm not blaming anybody, and this started very innocently when I said, you know, to somebody, frankly, that didn't really matter. I said, listen, the World Trade Center came down during, you know, there's nothing safe when the World Trade Center was attacked and came down during his reign. Well, that's not safe because he said, Jeb said, our country was safe. Well, that's not the case. And then if you want to go a little further, he then attacked Iraq, which turned out not to be the right country because they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. And by the way, the terrorists sent their families home to Saudi Arabia. They didn't send them home to Iraq. They sent them home to Saudi Arabia, which is another thing for people to think about.
You know, Mr. Trump, the only disagreement I have is we knew that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction because we have the images of the Kurds that were slaughtered and little children and women in the streets. We knew there was a chemical attack, and the world intelligence and fairness also thought that. I want to add another element to this. There's an unknown...
Well, you know, by the way, but they never found him. You're right.
They didn't find him.
They never found him.
I think they probably moved him to Syria myself.
Well, I don't know. They never found him. And frankly, he probably used them against Iran, which really was beautiful. I mean, not that they used the weapons, but the beauty of it was you had these two countries that were equal in terms of strength. And we decapitated one of those countries. And now Iran is taking over Iraq and everything else. And ISIS is taking oil, and Iran is taking oil, and they're taking over the whole country. So it's turned out to be really bad. With that being said, I respect the fact that Jeb is defending his brother. I think that's good. I would do the same thing.
One point I've always agreed with you on is that if we liberate Kuwait and we liberate Iraq, they need to pay us for the liberation. We need to give money to the families that lost brave American soldiers or are injured now for the rest of their lives. We don't do that. And I also think that if Obama would have, if he would have held the ground, ISIS never would have emerged. He wanted to pull out for political reasons.
I love that you bring up Kuwait. Kuwait had nothing but money. They get attacked by Iraq. They take over Kuwait. The rich Arabs go and they move into London, as you know, the Kuwaitis, they moved into London. They didn't take a room like you would, or maybe even I would. They took the entire hotel, and they lived like kings. And then we attack. We lose lives. We spent billions of dollars, and we give back the country for nothing.
Nothing.
And they don't even want to invest in. And then I told them, I had them in my office a few months after that. They don't like investing in the United States, okay? We gave them the country back for nothing. We should have said, we want 50% of everything you make for the next 50 years or permanently. And you know what? They would have agreed to it. We gave it back for nothing. Why did we do that?
We're a stupid country. That's the answer. We negotiate bad deals. I agree with you. Let me play for you. I want to add another element to this whole how come America wasn't prepared for 9/11. In a little-known speech on Long Island that Bill Clinton gave in February of 2002, the audio's a little sketchy, but I want you to pay close attention where he said, well, we knew he wanted to commit crimes against America, but I had no legal basis to take him. And I think he missed the opportunity. You had published 2 years earlier what a bad guy bin Laden was. Listen to Clinton admit that he could have gotten him, but he failed to take action. Listen to this. Keywords are, he committed no crimes against America, so I didn't bring him here because we had no basis on which to hold him, even though we knew he wanted to commit crimes against America. Now, here's the point. In 2000, you identified him as a citizen, a private citizen. And Bill Clinton knew he wanted to commit crimes against America, had the opportunity to get him, and didn't take him. Doesn't he bear that responsibility?
Well, he made a mistake, but I will tell you that if I were there, I would have taken him out. Now, I wrote about him in my book, and when I talk about the World Trade Center, that was the first attack, which was, compared to what happened, ultimately relatively minor. But I talk about Osama bin Laden in my book, and people can't believe it. They're just starting to read that book. That was the only political book I had ever done, and people are just starting to read that book, and they can't believe that I mentioned the name Osama bin Laden. Remember? And he ought to crawl under a rock, but we have to get him. And Clinton made a mistake, and frankly, Bush should have taken him out. Somebody should have taken him out. I think I would have. But I think my immigration policies would have gone a long way to helping us also, Sean.
Well, I think the immigration policy, we're now facing a crisis. You see what's happening in Europe. There's a huge backlash because of Syrian refugees and Iraqi refugees and the cost. We're being told by our National Intelligence Director that ISIS and Al-Qaeda, not if, they will infiltrate the refugee community. This president is committed to nearly 250,000 coming to America. That tells me we have a pre-9/11 mindset again. Your thoughts?
I was always a big fan of Merkel from Germany. I'm not a fan anymore. What she's doing is insane. And we want to take in 200,000, and we don't know where they come from. They have no papers. All we know is they're young and they're strong and they're mostly men. And this could be the greatest Trojan horse ever. This could be bigger than the original Trojan horse. We shouldn't be taking anybody. We have enough problems. We have to rebuild our country, our infrastructure. We owe $19 trillion. And by the way, taking in 200,000 is going to cost us, they just did a study, over a period of 10 years, going to cost us billions of dollars. What are we doing? Merkel made a tremendous mistake. They're going to end up having a revolution in Germany. You see what's happening with the German
100%.
people. Now, what we should do at the same time, from a humane standpoint, take a big chunk of Syria and let's all put some money into it if we have to, because on a humane basis, and build a safe zone, what's called a safe zone. Let the people, but to allow them into Germany and to allow them into these other countries where there's nothing but a horror show, you see what's happening, and now we're going to take in 200,000 people in this country?
Insane.
And we can't breathe. I mean, we don't know what we're doing.
You know, and I suggested the same thing. Make it a secure zone, offer humanitarian assistance, offer food, water, medicine, supplies,
Fine.
and keep them within Syria. All right, to close the circle on the feud with Jeb, if Jeb wins the nomination, will you support him?
Absolutely, yes. I would absolutely support him. He's a good person. He's a good man. I would support him.
Okay, stay right there. We'll have more coming up. More with Donald Trump, the Republican front poll, which had you at 1%, 51% if you look at these polls. I know you talk a lot about the polls, but they have been steady, they have been consistent, and now Byron York has a piece out, and there was another piece this week that says, finally the establishment believes you can win, and Byron York outlines how the establishment prepares to go after you as not being a conservative. Are you ready to deal with that, and what will you do?
Well, I am. Look, I have meetings in New Hampshire. We have thousands and thousands of people, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people every time. I went to Dallas. We had 20,000 in Mark Cuban's arena. It was an amazing evening. In Alabama, we had 35,000. Oklahoma, 20,000. Every place we go in Iowa, we have thousands and thousands, overflow crowds. People are tired of being ripped off in our country. We're run by people that are incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. Every nation is beating us. Obamacare is a disaster. Our Iran deal is horrible. It was done by people that don't know what they're doing. I mean, they don't know what they're doing. And people see what's happening. And look, they know I do things properly. I do the right thing. And they just like what I'm saying.
But when the
that's all you can
Republicans,
say.
the establishment now thinks you can win. And what they're planning and what they're telegraphing they're planning is a barrage of ads in early states. Huge buys, millions and millions of dollars, trying to chip away at your conservative credentials with primary voters. What do you think is the best way to respond to that?
But they're not buying. The candidates aren't buying the ads. The people that are buying the ads are the special interests, the donors, the people that are lobbyists. You know, you have lobbyists. I know half the lobbyists. I used to contribute to the lobbyists. Who knows more about a lobbyist than me? I know the good ones and the bad ones. But the lobbyists are going crazy because when they come to me, say they want me to do something for all these companies, even though it's not in the best interest of the United States, I'm not going to do it. When the special interests tell me to do something that's adverse to the people of the United States, I'm not going to do it because I'm not taking their money.
Will you fight back then with your own ads and your own money?
Sure, I'll fight back. Sure, of course I'm going to fight. I always fight back. I have to fight back.
I guess
Otherwise,
that's a
I
dumb
wouldn't
question.
be leading
When
every
has Donald
poll.
Trump not fought back?
No, but I wouldn't be leading every poll. But Sean, you have to understand, these people have hundreds of millions of dollars that they've given to these politicians, and the politicians are puppets for them. They're just puppets.
No.
With me, I'm going to do what's right for the country. We have $19 trillion in debt. We're going to get the debt paid. We're going to do things right. We're not going to let China rip us off anymore. It's enough already. You know that last year we had an imbalance with China of $450 billion. Who can stand that? You can't do that. And this has gone on for years and years, and nobody does anything because they have lobbyists, they have special interests, and I'm going to represent the people. We're going to make this country so great and so strong. But with that, a lot of money is going to be spent. And I just hope when people are watching this phony ads, you know, all of these phony ads that are going to be put out, that they're going to understand it's not the candidates, it's all of these special interests, Sean, that want to not have a guy like Trump because they're going to be out of business.
For them, this is the art of political war for them, and I think they're serious about it because they're talking about their power going away. Of the three Democrats, it looks like Biden's getting in the race. So of the three Democrats, Biden, Hillary, Bernie Sanders, if you win the nomination, is there any one you prefer going up against?
Well, I don't think Sanders is going to get there, frankly, and I don't mind going against Hillary's record. I think I'd beat her. You saw the various polls on myself against Hillary. I just beat her in Florida. A poll came out today where I beat her pretty easily in Florida. I beat her nationwide. I don't mind going against Hillary. And, you know, Biden is right now, he's got his little period of time where he's popular. As soon as he gets in, he'll get beaten up very badly. He's done this 3 or 4 times. He's lost every time. So I don't mind going against him at all. I don't want to pick a favorite, to be honest. I think I might have a favorite. But if you go by Hillary's record, I should win very easily.
Have you given any thought, if you win the nomination, 3 people that you would consider to be your vice president?
I have given thought, but I don't want to discuss it. It's just too early. I have to get there first. You know, I don't like talking about it. You have so many people, they don't win, they don't know how to win. I don't want to talk about anything. I do know how to win, but that's so far down the road. I will say I do respect some of the people that I'm running against, and I respect many of the people. You have many good Republicans out there that could really help and be terrific. And we're going to unify the Republican Party. We're going to unify it and make it strong, and we're going to win. We're not going to do what Romney did last time, where he should have won an election and he lost. We're going to unify the Republican Party, and we're going to win.
I heard you were supposed to be on Jimmy Kimmel tonight. Did something happen?
No, I have a political event, but I'm going to do his show in 2 weeks. I have a big political event, which I can't skip. And I told him, I said, you know, I have this event. I can't skip it, but I will be doing it in 2 weeks when I'm out in Los Angeles.
You know, there was an article that came out about Hillary. She has these big hearings coming up about Benghazi. We know that Ambassador Stevens requested security before it was denied. We know that during the attack that there was a stand-down order given because I interviewed people that were there. They told me personally. And we know they made up this story about a YouTube video and a spontaneous demonstration. We learned that about her. What do you think about the hearings? And there was another article that came out earlier today in the Washington Free Beacon that she paid men $16,000 more a year than women. What's your reaction to those two things with her?
Well, I have to tell you, I was really looking forward to the hearings, but then you had a congressman, Republican, go against Trey Gowdy and all of the people, as you know, and then you had a whistleblower come out, so that hurt. That was not exactly positive. And then yesterday I watched Trey, who I do respect. I think he's a terrific guy, but he seemed to be doing a big pivot. He said, well, this isn't about Hillary Clinton. You know, I'm pretty good at figuring this stuff out. And he seemed to be doing, Sean, I'm sure you saw it, he seemed to be doing a big pivot away from Hillary Clinton. And I was trying to figure out what that was all about. So you may not be as happy as you think with these hearings. I just don't know. The hearings, I was looking forward to them, but with all that's happening, and I was surprised that he pivoted away so much from Hillary. He said, these hearings are not about her. Actually, we want to discuss other people much more so. And it sounded like he was sort of pulling away from going after her. So I'm going to have to see what the hearings are all about.
All right, Mr. Trump.
Well, she did what she had to do. She got through it. She got through it fine. I thought the others were not strong. They were not going after her. It was a very kind debate, very gentle. And she got through the debate. She's got a substantial lead in the polls, so they had to hit her hard, and they decided not to do that. I think Bernie gave up for a good soundbite. It was a wonderful soundbite, but you have an FBI investigation going on. He gave up the email situation right then and there, and I think that's a mistake. I think that he's losing quite a bit. He's losing by so much that he really should not have done that, although it was a nice moment for him and a nice moment for her. Actually, a much better moment for her.
It puts the issue away. You said it was was a good move by Bernie Sanders. He also took on casino capitalist Bernie Sanders did. That sounds like a preview of a possible attack on you. So who wins between a casino capitalist and a democratic socialist?
Well, we're going to have to see. I mean, you know, it's going to be a race. I don't think he's going to get there. I thought his performance was okay, but he had to be much better than okay. He had to come out the clear winner. He didn't. And I actually think she probably came out not the winner, but yeah, probably if you think about it, George, she came out the winner. She did what she had to do, and they were extremely gentle. The other three, it's not going to happen.
And at the same time, there's a new Fox poll out that shows Ben Carson catching up with you, almost even with you. You're at 24, he's at 23. How do you explain that, and are you ready to take him on?
Well, I can't really explain it. I mean, I've been #1 for a long time, and I'm #1 in every poll, and in most cases by very big numbers and double-digit numbers. This was one that came out yesterday. He's been getting a lot of ink on the Muslims and other things, and I guess people look at that and they probably like it. Some people thought they wouldn't like it, but they probably do. It's interesting, but you know, he's a good guy. He's a nice guy. We get along very well. We'll see if that continues. But as you see, I'm still in the lead, and I've actually gone up a little bit, and he's gone up, and other people have gone down. So many of the others are way down. It's really amazing. It looks like a two-man race.
Right now, you guys are at the top. So are you going to have to take him on? Are you going to have to take the gloves off with Ben Carson?
Probably at some point, yes. Which I actually look forward to doing. I can't do it, though. He's been so nice to me, George. I can't do it.
But what's the #1 issue for you to take him on?
Well, I think there's a lot of issues, but one of them would be experience. I mean, Ben is a doctor, and that's what he's been doing. And the question is he capable of negotiating with China and Russia and Iran and all of the things you have to do? And, you know, there'll be a lot of things, but I think at this moment I'm not going to go into them, but there will be a lot of things having to do with capacity, having to do with experience.
Donald Trump, thanks for joining us again this morning.
Thank you very much, George.
It's been quite a week, hasn't it? Well, thank you all so much. I am absolutely delighted to be here. As some of you may know, I had a pretty long day yesterday. But I finally got to answer questions, something I've been pushing for literally a year. And I am just grateful I recovered my voice, which I lost a little bit. But as I said at the start, I wanted to rise above partisanship and reach for statesmanship, and that is what I tried to do. And now I am delighted to be here with all of you, to be with the WOLF, a group that actually focuses on the issues. You are women after my own heart. And I want to thank Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Carol Penske, Cynthia Friedman, Lottie Shackelford, and all the terrific speakers you've heard from and will hear from, including my friend, leader Nancy Pelosi. And I want to say a word about another great Democrat who has always been a champion for women and families and all of us. Vice President Joe Biden has been in the trenches with us for years. He fought for the Violence Against Women Act and so much more. And I'm confident that history isn't finished with Joe Biden. As he said the other day, there is more work to do, and if I know Joe, he'll be right there with us on the front lines. And I want to thank all of you for putting women's voices, women's ideas, women's lives right where they belong at the heart of American politics. You know, it is sometimes hard to believe, but the notion that women should be equal partners in the life of our nation is still pretty new. That's why the Women's Leadership Forum was created, to help make that ideal a reality. During the 1992 campaign, Tipper Gore and I traveled all over the country together, and we spent a lot of time in people's living rooms, in their backyards, sitting around kitchen tables, talking with mothers and daughters and grandmothers about their lives. And we heard so much. We heard about the dreams for the future that people had for themselves and their kids, and we heard a lot about the struggles that made life harder than it should be, the problems that kept women up at night. Again and again, we would hear, you know, no one's ever asked us these things before. To a lot of them, it seemed like Washington just wasn't very interested in the actual real lives of women in our country. So we decided we had to make sure that in this party, our party, women's voices would always be heard. That in this party, our party, the problems that keep women and their families up at night would always be front and center. And we wanted to bring more women into the electoral process as voters and advocates, as organizers, fundraisers, candidates, and elected officials, because we know women are half the country, indeed slightly more, half the planet, and more than half the Democratic Party. So if we want to make sure that women and families are better represented in politics, we need to get more of us involved in politics at every level. As we like to say, when women lead, families succeed. And now, 22 years later, women are a greater force in politics here in our country than ever before. We are voting in greater numbers. Increasingly, we are the decisive voters in national elections. More women are serving at high levels of government. There are not one, not two, but 3 women on the Supreme Court. And the number of women who have served in the Senate and the House has grown exponentially. And now, of course, another presidential election season has begun. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure that the issues that matter most to women and families are front and center in this race. I started my campaign last spring doing the same thing that I did all those years ago when I ran for the Senate, traveling across the country, visiting people's homes and schools and businesses, and actually listening as they told me about their lives, the good and the bad, the hard. It was an amazing and humbling experience. If you find the time and space to give people a chance to talk to you instead of you talking at them, they'll share what's in their hearts and in their hopes. Now, many families do feel that things are a lot better for them, and they give credit, as they should, to President Obama and his administration. And I believe the President's leadership and the hard work of the American people pulled our economy and our nation back from the brink. In fact, we could have had a Great Depression, not a Great Recession. So as I travel across the country, I try to tell the story of what President Obama inherited, the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. So America is standing again, but we're not yet running the way we should be. And families are still stretched in a million different directions, and so are their budgets. Costs keep rising, but most people's paychecks haven't moved in years. But corporate profits and CEO pay keep rising. Quality childcare costs more than college tuition in many states. And the minimum wage is a poverty wage. Millions of Americans are held back by student debt, and at a time when more women than ever are their families' main breadwinners, too often they still don't get equal pay. And women of color earn less than others, right? And just this week, the Department of Labor released new data showing that as our economy gets stronger, men's pay is going up more than twice as fast as women's pay. You know, in one of my town halls in Nevada, I called on a little girl who was sitting with her father, and you never know what kids are going to ask you, which is why I try to call on at least one if they're in my town hall. And this little girl stood up and she said, "If you're a girl president, will you be paid as much as a boy president?" I said, "Well, I think so. I think that's in the law." But I think of the single mom I met who's juggling a job and classes at a community college while raising her 3 kids on her own. She's doing what she has to give her children a better life, and she doesn't expect anything to come easy. But she asked me, "Isn't there anything we can do so it doesn't have to be quite so hard?" I think of the student who told me that paying for college shouldn't be the hardest thing about going to college. Or the man I met whose mother has Alzheimer's. He's a teacher. He can't afford a full-time caretaker for her. He can't quit his job or he wouldn't be able to support her. So you know what he does? He brings her to work with him. There's nothing else he can think of to do, and he told me this with so much sadness because this is not what he pictured for his mother's golden years. And it's not just women taking care of aging parents. It is, like this young man, men too. All of our caretakers deserve a lot more support. And the same goes for other policies, like paid family leave, fair and predictable shifts, higher wages so you don't have to work 2 jobs to make ends meet, and you can actually be home with your kids at night. And these are not just challenges for women, they're challenges for all Americans. Because I firmly believe when we fight for women, we're fighting for our entire country, and the reverse is true as well. When we fight to make America fairer, stronger, and more prosperous, we are also fighting for women. When we fight to make college more affordable and student debt less punishing, or to hold corporations accountable when they gouge us on drug prices or pollute our environment or exploit workers, that's fighting for women and men and fighting for America. And when we fight to create a pathway to citizenship for millions of immigrants, or to make Social Security even stronger, or to protect and improve the Affordable Care Act because everyone deserves access to quality, affordable care. And yes, that access should include basics like reproductive care, including birth control and pre- and postnatal care and cancer screenings. That's why we have to defend Planned Parenthood against the attacks that are being waged. When we fight to protect the equal rights of all our people, no matter what they look like or who they love, and when we fight to stop the epidemic of gun violence that's claiming innocent lives every single day in every corner of our country, that's fighting for women and men and fighting for America. You know, I've been told to stop, and I quote, shouting about gun violence. Well, first of all, I'm not shouting. It's just when women talk, some people think we're shouting. And second, I will not be silenced because we will not be silenced. Not by the gun lobby, not by the size of this challenge, not by any of it. Stopping gun violence is worth fighting for. And I'm ready to go, and I hope you will join with me. Now, none of these fights are new to me, and I know they aren't new to many of you, but we do have our work cut out for us because there are so many people with a very different vision for our country. And They will say, do, and spend whatever it takes to advance their out-of-touch, out-of-date agenda. For people who say they hate big government, Republicans sure spend a lot of time trying to restrict women's reproductive health and reproductive rights. After my experience yesterday, I am just amazed that they are even talking about setting up another special investigative committee, this time to investigate Planned Parenthood. And I think we all know by now that's just code for a partisan witch hunt. Haven't we seen enough of that? I'd like those Republican candidates who are advocating against Planned Parenthood to meet the mom who caught her cancer early thanks to a screening at Planned Parenthood, or the young woman who avoided an unintended pregnancy because she did have access to birth control. Now, I know that when I talk like this, Republicans will say, I'm playing the gender card. Well, you know what? Here's what I say. If calling for equal pay and paid leave and women's health is playing the gender card, then deal me in. There's a long campaign still ahead of us, and other candidates from the other party may be out there hurling insults at everyone and talking about what's wrong with America and pointing fingers to try to blame people for it. Well, that's not me. I'm going to keep doing what I have always done, and that's fight for you and fight for your families. And I am so grateful for the hundreds of thousands of grassroots activists who are joining me in this campaign. Not only those fortunate enough like us to be in rooms like this one, but the workers and students and teachers, the parents and grandparents all across our country who are giving $1 or $5 at a time because they too believe in what we are fighting for. So we've come a long way in the past 22 years. I'm really proud of this organization and all that it has achieved. The Women's Leadership Forum has changed the Democratic Party. You've changed it for the better. We're stronger than we've ever been. So let's keep fighting for that better future for our children and our grandchildren. Now, as some of you, I'm sure know, I have the most amazing, extraordinary granddaughter. And she really does keep me going, and thankfully, my daughter and wonderful son-in-law send me little videos and little pictures, which have been a great boost along the campaign trail. And I think a lot about her future. I think about what kind of opportunities she'll have. But I also think about what kind of opportunities all the children of America will have. What kind of country will she become an adult in? What kind of world will be waiting for her? Because I don't think it's not enough for anybody that my granddaughter, your children and grandchildren, certainly the granddaughter of a former president, should be able to pursue her dreams when so many of our other children in this country are feeling left behind and left out. For the first time in American history, so far as I know, more than half of the kids in our public schools are eligible for free or reduced price lunches. Poverty has returned with a vengeance. We made a lot of progress against poverty, lifting families out of poverty back in the 90s. I think it's a verifiable fact that our economy does better when we have a Democrat in the White House. And Both my husband and President Obama inherited economic challenges from their Republican predecessors. Both worked hard. With my husband, it was dealing with an economy that wasn't growing fast enough, but then took off, 23 million new jobs, and incomes rising at every part of our economy, top, middle, working, low income people, all were doing better. We handed over a balanced budget and a surplus to the incoming Republican administration, and they squandered it all. Not only did they cut taxes dramatically on the wealthy, but they basically got out of the way of corporations. They took their eye off the financial markets. They didn't pay a penny for the wars that they waged. And you know what happened. And it took another Democratic president, who you will hear from later today, to come in and accept the responsibility, which he did, to try to repair the damage that had been done. Now, everything I've talked about before, all of our rights, all of our hopes, will be at risk if the Republicans once again are successful in making the same argument they always make. It's discredited, it doesn't work, but that doesn't stop them. They'll be back talking about cutting taxes on the wealthy, getting out of the way of corporations. We know what that leads to: increasing inequality, exploitation of workers, pollution of our environment, denial of climate change, refusal to move into the 21st century with clean, renewable energy, a failure to provide early childhood education and universal pre-kindergarten so every kid has a chance to get ahead. You can listen to their debates for hours, and unfortunately, some of us have to. And you won't hear a single solution to any of the problems we're facing here at home or around the world. So my campaign is really an effort to try to build an America where everyone, women and men, can rise as far as their talents and hard work take them. Where everyone